Whoever placed these bombs, we will find, and they will be brought to justice, period.
In New Jersey, the FBI investigating a blast from a pipe bomb hidden in a garbage can that rocked a charity race. And now ISIS claims responsibility for a stabbing rampage at a Minnesota mall. 9 victims.
We are currently investigating this as a potential act of terrorism.
The attacker reportedly made reference to Allah before being killed. ISIS now calling the suspect a, quote, soldier of the Islamic State. A night of violence raising new questions and concern about the homeland threat. On the campaign trail, quick and differing reactions from the candidates.
It's always wiser to wait until you have information before making conclusions.
We are going to get tough and smart and vigilant.
And brand new Fox News polls are out showing who the voters think is more qualified to be president. We'll dive into the numbers, take you out on the campaign trail, and bring you the latest breaking developments of these ongoing terror investigations. This is your Sunday edition of Special Report.
Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. Bombings in New York and New Jersey. 9 people stabbed in Minnesota, and the FBI investigating all 3. New investigative details tonight. We start tonight in the Big Apple, where correspondent Peter Doocy is on the ground with the very latest. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Brett. There is a bomber or bombers on the loose tonight, and authorities are trying to track them down before they have another opportunity to try and blow up innocent New Yorkers.
A bomb exploding in New York is obviously an act of terrorism.
And now the terrorist is threatening to plant more devices in the city. A 911 call reportedly placed minutes after Saturday night's explosion and published by the New York Post includes the following line, quote, "I'm looking at the explosion down the block. There will be more." That's a frightening pledge allegedly coming from someone capable of making a few blocks of Manhattan feel like a battlefield.
I heard boom, boom, and everything started shaking, like if I was in Iraq and a bomb dropped. That's what it sounded like.
Investigators spent Sunday poring over surveillance footage from 2 crime scenes on 23rd Street, where the concussion from the IED sent 29 people to the hospital and shattered nearby glass windows and doors, and on 27th Street, where a similar pressure cooker device left on the sidewalk failed to detonate.
Right now, we don't have enough information to make any final conclusion. We don't know if there's any political or social motivation, but we definitely had a bombing last night on 23rd Street.
The FBI is sending some evidence to their lab at Quantico in Virginia, and the NYPD bomb squad carefully analyzed the unexploded pressure cooker in their facility. Experts are confident the intact device gives authorities a major advantage in their manhunt because there's not usually that much evidence left behind after a bombing.
Way back in Lockerbie, right, when the forensics, the technology wasn't anywhere where it was at. And in that crime scene, they found this little dinky thing with a serial number on it.
Wow.
And traced it back to a place in Germany and solved that case.
Since no arrests have been made yet, New York's leaders are taking no chances.
We will be deploying close to an additional 1,000 New York State Police and National Guard people to police the bus terminals, airports, and subway stations. I want New Yorkers to be confident when they go back to work on Monday.
We've spoken to the woman who found the second IED and called it in. Her name is Jane Schriebner, 66 years old, said that she saw a pressure cooker, knew it could be used to build a bomb, and her call that got a bomb squad there within a few minutes likely saved a lot of people from serious injury or worse. Brett?
Yeah, we'll follow this investigation closely. A lot of video cameras in that area. We'll see what investigators have. But have they, Peter, directly discovered a connection between the bombings there in New York City and New Jersey earlier yesterday?
Not yet, Brett. There are obvious similarities in terms of proximity, just about a 2-hour drive in between the blast locations, and also timing, just about 11 hours apart. But there are differences as well. In New Jersey, it was pipe bombs. Here, it was pressure cooker bombs. And at this hour tonight, we still do not know if there is a common person at the two locations, or if there's anything that links the town in New Jersey to the spots in Chelsea. Brett?
Okay, we'll follow it. Peter, thank you. 1,200 miles to the west of New York City, the motivations behind the stabbing seem to be immediately clear. ISIS-related media are claiming the Minnesota attacker was one of their own, and FBI investigators are viewing the attack as an act of terrorism, homegrown and inspired or otherwise. Correspondent Dan Springer has been following this investigation.
Brett, it had to be 5 chaotic and terrifying minutes in that Minnesota mall, and now the FBI says this is a possible act of terrorism. The Joint Terrorism Task Force is conducting the investigation along with the St. Cloud Police Department. ISIS-related media has already claimed responsibility, putting out this statement. The executor of the attacks in Minnesota yesterday was a soldier of the Islamic State and carried out the operation in response to calls to target the citizens of countries belonging to the Crusader Coalition. It happened just after 8 o'clock last night at the Crossroads Mall in St. Cloud. A man wearing a security guard uniform pulled out a knife and started stabbing people. Police say one person who was attacked was asked if he was a Muslim. Others heard the attacker reference Allah. Police found the attacker's car in the parking lot and have conducted 2 property searches at nearby apartments. The suspect lived in St. Cloud but had only a few contacts with police for minor things, nothing more serious than traffic violations. They have not released his name.
We are currently investigating this as a potential act of terrorism. And I do say potential. There's a lot we don't know. We do not at this point in time know whether the subject was in contact with, had connections with, was inspired by a foreign terrorist organization.
We now know 9 people were stabbed, 7 men and 2 women ranging in age from 15 to 55. 3 of the victims are still in the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Police are crediting an off-duty officer for saving lives. Jason Faulkner was shopping when he saw the commotion. He ended up shooting and killing the suspect in heroic fashion.
We're a strong community. We're a united community. And there is, in this individual, this evil act, unjustifiable in any means, will not shake the resolve of this community.
St. Cloud is just an hour drive from Minneapolis, which has been a major focus of federal terror investigations dating back years. It's home to the largest Muslim Somali population in the U.S., and the FBI says ISIS and al-Qaeda have done heavy recruiting in the area. In the last year, 9 Somali men have been convicted of terror-related charges. We'll have to wait and see if this knife attack is in any way related. Brett?
Dan, thank you. This weekend's incidents are just the latest examples of why many terror experts in and out of the government are on high alert in recent weeks. Correspondent Kristen Fisher is here with some historical perspective about the issue of Homeland Security. Kristen, good evening.
Good evening, Brett. Well, you know, if what happened in Minnesota does indeed turn out to be inspired or directed by ISIS, it would be the 5th attack on U.S. soil in just under 2 years. And when you add in similar attacks in Europe, that number more than doubles. Here at home, the FBI says it has close to 1,000 open cases in all 50 states focused on people who are at some stage between consuming the poison of the group we call ISIL or ISIS and acting on that poison. At the same time, the Obama administration has just announced plans to allow an additional 110,000 refugees into the U.S. next year, including an unknown number from Syria. Well, critics like retired Lieutenant General and Trump advisor Mike Flynn say they're deeply concerned.
You've got the director of the FBI that has said we have 1,000 cases going on in this country in all 50 states. I mean, what's going on? So we have to pay attention to the refugees that are coming into this country. We have to pay attention to the undocumented or illegals that are in this country.
Now, last week, on the 15th anniversary of 9/11, the Secretary of Homeland Security said the U.S. is safer, but challenged by a different type of attack.
We're safer now when it comes to another 9/11 style attack, but we're challenged when it comes to the prospect of the lone wolf actor, the homegrown violent extremist, and that requires a new whole-of-government response.
And while we still don't know who is behind the bombings in New York and New Jersey, investigators say they do fit the profile of a lone wolf attack. Brett?
All right, Kristen, thank you. From New York to talk about the uptick in violence is Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Senator, thanks for being here.
Hello, Brett.
You know, it's disconcerting, obviously, for people over the weekend to hear about these attacks and to hear about the people injured. There is the question about connecting all of these and if that is happening with investigators. What can you tell us?
Well, just in open news reports, it sounds like the New York City police have connected the New Jersey and New York bombings together. But Brett, what is so disconcerting about this is these are 3 attacks in literally 24 hours. And you start seeing attacks in St. Cloud, Minnesota. You know, when I travel around Wisconsin, I often ask audiences, have you ever heard of Sami Mohammed Hamza? Very few people have. They have heard of the Masonic Center. And Sami Mohammed Hamza, in January of just this year, told police and FBI informants that he'd be 100% happy if he could slaughter 30 people at the Masonic Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So, you know, what we're finding out is these terrorist attacks are occurring with far too great a frequency, and they're occurring all over the country. No place is safe.
You know, we've heard, Senator, that ISIS is claiming responsibility, or at least applauding the efforts in Minnesota, and we don't know about the bombings in New York and the device in New Jersey, but we do know that homegrown terrorism inspired by ISIS seems to be on the minds of intel officials the most. Knowing what you know, is that your biggest fear?
It is. It's the inspired lone wolf. But let's face it, Brett, we're now talking about wolf packs that are directed by ISIS. That's what we think happened probably in Brussels and Istanbul. And of course, we've seen this occur now far too many places in San Bernardino and Orlando, and again, foiled plot in Milwaukee. Now we've got St. Cloud, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York. We have got to defeat ISIS. It's been over 2 years since President Obama laid out America's goal toward ISIS, which was to defeat it. And we may be nibbling around the edges. We're maybe doing some damage, but the analogy I always use is a beehive in your backyard. We all know what we need to do. You need to take out the hive. But President Obama, in effect, is poking the hive, doing some damage, but he's stirring up the nest. They're spreading. ISIS is metastasizing. It's evolving. It's spreading. And you don't just believe me. You can believe CIA Director John Brennan, who testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee about a month ago. He said that our efforts have not reduced ISIS's terror capability and their global reach. They remain a formidable, a resilient, and largely intact enemy. That's not very good after 2 years of effort.
Your party's nominee is very concerned about Syrian refugees specifically, refugees overall being accepted into the U.S. What's your level of concern, first as Homeland Security Chairman in the Senate, but also as a Republican running for re-election?
In terms of ISIS operatives coming into this country, I'm more concerned about them coming in through our very porous southern borders. So that's my first concern. But listen, it's a legitimate concern to be wary of refugees that are not fully vetted. So the first thing we need to do with any refugees is we need to set proper criteria. We really can let refugees in with zero risk. And what I've always said about Syrian refugees, why not set criteria, for example, women and children relatives of Syrian American citizens who have the financial wherewithal to support them, and if there's any question whatsoever, you don't let the refugee in. I'm the sponsor of the SAFE Act in the Senate, which would require the Secretary of Homeland Security, the FBI Director, and the head of the Terrorism Center to certify that whoever we let in poses no risk to America, and we really can't vet people that well. Just take no risks.
Senator, you're up there in New York to be a part of the United Nations General Assembly as an invited guest. Do you expect security to be increased exponentially because of what we've seen over this weekend?
Well, it'll definitely be increased. There's already an awful lot of security. There's all kinds of barriers set up, but this bombing obviously occurred outside that security zone, and so no, I'm sure there'll be heightened security. But we always have to remain vigilant. DHS's motto, "If you see something, say something," is not just a trite phrase. Americans have to be wary, unfortunately, because we have not addressed Islamic terror. We have not been relentless in tracking them down and defeating them, and that's really what we have to do. First and foremost is we have to defeat ISIS in Syria and Iraq, and then we've got to, again, relentlessly track down Islamic terrorists wherever they may have taken up safe haven anywhere in the globe.
Senator, last thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the election. I alluded to it there with Donald Trump and what he's saying about refugees, but in Wisconsin, Donald Trump trails Hillary Clinton Clinton in the latest polls by 3 to 5 points. Most senators up for re-election, Republican senators, are outperforming the GOP nominee in their states by a number of points. You're roughly down to Russ Feingold by about 3 to 8 points. What's happening in your race in Wisconsin?
Well, I think the race is definitely tightening. Most Wisconsinites enjoy the summer, and they start turning their attention really after Labor Day, and they're starting to, and that's why you see the race tighten. So I actually feel pretty good about the race. I'm a citizen legislator, a guy with 31 years of manufacturing. I'm chairman of Homeland Security. I've actually gotten results. I'm running against a 34-year career politician who has very little to show for it. So I think when Wisconsinites take a look at the two individuals, Senator Feingold actually believes Hillary Clinton is honest and is trustworthy. So I think they'll make the right choice, and I actually feel pretty good about the election.
Senator Johnson, thanks for the time tonight.
Have a good night.
Up next, the VP nominees take to the airwaves on the Sunday shows, setting up a busy week ahead to come on the campaign trail for each party's nominee. We'll have the latest, plus new Fox polls. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 46 in Charlotte, North Carolina, where state troopers say 4 people were killed, including a 10-year-old, in a charter bus crash Saturday near Rockingham. The bus blew a tire before sideswiping a concrete bridge column there. 42 riders were taken to the local hospital with injuries ranging from critical to minor in nature. WSVN in Miami with new non-travel related Zika cases in Miami Beach. Mosquito eradication efforts are ongoing as the local transmission area has now expanded to 55 blocks. There are now, as of tonight, 93 non-travel related Zika cases in Florida. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from Fox 29, our affiliate there. The big story there tonight is one of the 2 police officers wounded in a Friday night shooting rampage is now out of the hospital. A note was found on the shooter, who was killed by police in that shootout, expressing hatred for law enforcement and a probation officer. Police believe the gunman acted on his own and not part of a group. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. 51 days from now, at this hour, election results will be flowing in from the East Coast as the country selects the next commander-in-chief. With 8 days to go before the first face-to-face debate, neither Donald Trump nor Hillary Clinton hit the campaign trail today, but that does not mean all was quiet. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel in Philadelphia with the Clinton campaign trying to take back momentum in this race. But we begin with senior national correspondent John Roberts outside Trump Tower as the Republican nominee is getting ready for the debate showdown. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. A day off the campaign trail today for Donald Trump, but hardly a day off work, according to sources. Trump huddling with his closest advisors to prepare for that all-important first presidential debate.
With just a week to go until his first face-to-face meeting with Hillary Clinton, some good news for Donald Trump. Fully 50% of respondents in a new Fox News poll say America needs a new kind of leader. The bad news? Among likely voters, a majority say Trump is neither qualified nor has the temperament to be president.
I must tell you that just before I got off the plane, a bomb went off in New York, and nobody knows exactly what's going on.
Critics are trying to drive those negatives home, pointing to Trump's swift pronouncement last night that the explosion in New York City was a bomb before the facts were in. While Hillary Clinton also said it was a bomb, she criticized Trump for not waiting for the police to confirm it, provoking this response this morning from New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
This is typical Mrs. Clinton. She has absolutely no basis to be critical of what he did yesterday, but since her campaign is only based upon that, that's the only issue she could go to.
The Clinton campaign is also going after Trump for suggesting she might be in danger if she wasn't protected by armed Secret Service agents.
Take their guns away. She doesn't want guns. Let's see what happens to her.
Clinton supporters again accused Trump of inciting violence against her. Poppycock, said Trump's running mate today.
That's absolute nonsense. His comment was that if she didn't have all that security, she'd change her attitude about the right to keep and bear arms.
But it was still the sort of off-script message-killing tangent that gives his new campaign team fits as they struggle to keep Trump focused on policy. Today, his surrogate spent precious time beating back headlines generated by his Friday media event about where President Obama was born.
This started with Hillary Clinton's campaign number one. Let's move on to creating jobs, defeating radical Islam, rebuilding our inner cities.
It's those issues, jobs, national security, economic opportunity, that Trump's campaign team wants to be the focus of that first presidential debate on September the 26th. Their biggest concern, Brett, that their candidate continues to provide plenty of juicy quotes ripe for the picking that have nothing to do with any of that. Brett?
John Roberts outside Trump Tower. John, thank you. Well, the recent polls have not been positive for Hillary Clinton, and the race does look very close. Senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is in Philadelphia with the Clinton campaign, ready to go on the attack, we understand. Good evening, Mike.
Well, Brett, good evening. With Hillary Clinton's post-convention bounce now gone, her running mate acknowledges they have a fight ahead, even after calling Donald Trump a bigot and unfit to be commander-in-chief.
Obviously, we've got a real case to make between now and November 8th that our vision of Stronger Together.
So we're having some technical difficulties with our report, but bottom line is Hillary Clinton is coming here to Philadelphia tomorrow. She is going to make the case to millennial voters at a speech at Temple University. Philadelphia is worth noting because, of course, this is where she received her party's nomination to be the nominee for President of the United States. And so there was a lot of back and forth about this attack in New York City. Donald Trump took a lot of heat for using the word bomb in the aftermath of that attack, but it is worth noting that Hillary Clinton used that language as well. Her campaign rushed her out to talk to campaign reporters, and let's see if we can go back to the video right now.
Obviously, we've got a real case to make between now and November 8th that our vision of Stronger Together is the vision that Americans should embrace going forward, and we have confidence that we will.
Some of the negativity in the campaign has backfired after Hillary Clinton called some Trump supporters a basket of deplorables and irredeemable. Today, Kaine split with Clinton, clearly appearing uncomfortable with the suggestion those backing Trump are beyond redemption.
That's not a word I would use. I wouldn't use it. I think we would be unrealistic to think that some people are going to fundamentally change their view.
Last night, just hours after an explosion in New York City injured 29, there was clearly an effort by the Clinton campaign to have the candidate look presidential by reacting to the breaking news. But when Clinton tried taking questions from a small group of traveling reporters, she sounded cautious and didn't have many answers.
I've been briefed about the bombings in New York and New Jersey and the attack in Minnesota. I think it's always wiser to wait until you have information before making conclusions, because we are just in the beginning stages of trying to determine what happened. Obviously, do everything we can to determine who was behind these incidents. I don't think it's just time to think about anything besides that. I don't think we know, and I think it would not be appropriate to speculate.
It is worth noting over the past 24 hours, Donald Trump has taken a great deal of heat for using the word bombing in the immediate aftermath of that Manhattan attack. But there in that piece, you heard Hillary Clinton use the word bombings as well at a time when national security and terrorism become front and center issues once again in this campaign. Brett?
Mike Emanuel with the Clinton campaign. Nice job with the tape gremlins there. Let's take a deeper look now into the state of the race, including our new Fox News polls. Joining me from New York, co-host of a new show, I'll Tell You What, Dana Perino, former White House press secretary for President George W. Bush and co-host of The Five, of course, and Chris Stirewalt, Fox News digital politics editor. Congratulations, first show. I'll tell you what, it was pretty good.
It's fun to hear you say, I'll tell you what.
I am so confident.
With a cockamamie name like that.
I am so confident that the gremlins are gone, that we're here at the wall, and we're going to give this a shot. I'm going to do my best, Bill Hemmer. That's how confident I am. I want to do the electoral votes. You know, it takes 270 to win. This is where it stands right now, as the polls are, you know, the states that are in Clinton's column, 217. The states that are in Trump's column, this is according to Fox News. Obviously, this can change, but we are looking at states that could go one way or another. Let's just play a little bit, if you will, with me, and I'll have you comment. If we go and give Florida to Donald Trump and Georgia, you know, Chris, the Democrats say they have a chance in Georgia. Do they?
Well, sure, they have a chance, and if Hillary Clinton is doing well enough to have won in Georgia, she will be winning a smashing election with huge electoral votes. But we do see Arizona and Georgia as states that we have to consider in play this cycle.
All right, but let's say for our what if, we give it to Donald Trump, right?
Presumption.
South Carolina, North Carolina. What do you think, Dana?
I think South Carolina is going to be solidly for the Republicans and for Donald Trump. North Carolina, I think, is where Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are going to try to make a stand to try to keep that or get that back into the blue column. I mean, that was a heartbreaker for the Obamas in the last time. I think that they're going to try to get it. The demographics in North Carolina very similar now to Virginia, and President Obama won that handily last time around.
Okay, so we're going to give South Carolina to Donald Trump and North Carolina, even though that could go the Democrats' way and they feel more confident, but the polls still have Trump up. Okay, what else? Iowa, let's say he's up in Iowa. Let's say he takes Nevada out west. But let's talk Democrats here. Pennsylvania is a stretch for Donald Trump, right, Chris Stirewalt?
Yeah, and we have new polling out this week that suggests that her lead there remains almost to 10 points.
Okay, so we'll give that to Hillary Clinton. We can also, Dana, give Colorado and New Mexico to Hillary Clinton. Think?
I think that that's right. In fact, I was just in Denver visiting my mom and my sister over the weekend. It's mixed there. It's certainly not just going to be a runaway for Hillary Clinton, but I think the Democrats feel pretty comfortable that Colorado is for them.
Okay, and Michigan, it's back and forth, Chris, but really heading blue, right?
Yeah, I think Big Blue ain't just University of Michigan. I think Michigan stays in the blue column this time so far.
Okay, so now we come to Ohio, obviously a key swing state, and for our purposes, let's say the polls are heading the right way. Donald Trump takes Ohio. Okay, now this is the math. These are the electoral votes. Notice here, 267 to 267. There is one state that is not filled in here. It is the state of Maine. 4 electoral votes in Maine. But interestingly enough, it is one of 2 states that does 2 for the statewide vote, the popularity vote, and 1 electoral vote per congressional district. So Chris Stirewalt, it is conceivable that Maine, and the other state that does it is Nebraska, could split up their electoral votes.
Brother Bear, I like how you are thinking about the most diabolical possible thing that we would have to do on the decision desk on election night. That you have conjured the decision desk horror story where you're at a deadlock and we're counting out congressional districts in these states. I'm getting palpitations just thinking about that. My goodness, that would be exciting.
Yeah, we've got Maine up here, and this is New Hampshire. But let's say New Hampshire goes to the D. But you're talking about 4 electoral votes potentially, Dana, in a scenario that could come down to a race that close.
And there's some pretty tumultuous politics right now in the state of Maine, especially with the Republican governor not being the most, can I say he's not popular? I think I can say that.
I think that's pretty clear.
They've got a little bit of problems. And so I think that New Hampshire and Maine, yeah, those are going to be ones to watch. Interestingly, this past week we saw that Kelly Ayotte, the incumbent senator from New Hampshire, who's in a tough re-election race, looks like she is able to stick it out. And right now, if the election were held tomorrow, she would win. And so that actually bodes well for Donald Trump, probably.
Okay, and obviously we should point out any of these states can go the other way, and one state goes the other way that has significant electoral votes, and you've got a scenario where Donald Trump can pull this out. So it is really interesting to see. And just a quick look back to 2012 and how the map looked in 2012, Chris Stirewalt, the real question for us now is whether the 2012 electorate is going to be the 2016 electorate.
That's right. And when we've looked at polling in Ohio and some fascinating polling that was done last week, which looked at what if it's more like a 2004 model instead of the 2012 model? What if millennials stay home? What if African American and Hispanic voters don't mobilize in the way for Hillary Clinton that they did for Barack Obama? If it's that electorate, then Donald Trump could stand to do very well in places with large white populations and lots of blue-collar voters. And that's why I think you and Dana are right on the money to talk about New Hampshire and to talk about Maine. Those are the kind of states that could be bellwethers for a good Donald Trump performance.
And we made it through. These are your toss-up states. This is New Hampshire. This is Maine. It was already blue, so my finger did a little clicking while we did it, but it wasn't the TV gremlins. Congratulations on your show, and we'll be tuning in next week.
Okay, thanks,
Brett. What one criteria is most important to you in deciding who will get your vote in November? Let me know on Twitter @BrettBaer and use the hashtag Special Report. We could use it later on in the show with the panel. Up next, the changing face of law enforcement in a post-9/11 world. The investigation in New York is only the latest reminder of the struggle to protect the country while at the same time preserving people's freedoms. Rick Leventhal has our report on the evolving fight against terrorism since 9/11 and how American law enforcement officials are learning from Israel's model.
We are stronger against another 9/11-style terrorist-directed attack from overseas.
A vote of confidence from the Secretary of Homeland Security on Fox News Sunday on the anniversary of 9/11. So how much has security changed since that tragic day? In 2001, there were 35 joint terrorism task forces around the country. Today, there are more than 100. Since 9/11, the number of FBI special agents assigned to national security has nearly doubled. Also, since 9/11, the NYPD has formed the nation's top counterterrorism division with more than 1,200 cops and analysts. Near Ground Zero, we met with the NYPD's head of intelligence and counterterrorism, John Miller, and Bill Bratton, who just stepped down as New York's police commissioner.
With the kind of job that you can never rest because the threat always exists.
It's going to be here for our lifetimes and probably into the lifetime of our children, unfortunately. And what's incredibly important is constant collaboration, something that wasn't there before 9/11 between the federal agencies among themselves, certainly not with the locals.
Collaboration matters to help identify and catch the terrorists before they act. But aggressive tactics, such as New York's stop and frisk, raise concerns over profiling to identify potential suspects. Civil rights advocates forced the NYPD to revise the program.
Are your hands tied in any way at this point?
I mean, I would say that there are those constraints, but I would also say they're necessary. Counterterrorism comes with intelligence, and when you're collecting intelligence in a democratic society, if you don't do it within a strict set of rules, you're going to end up on the wrong side of democracy.
But you're still able to do what you feel you need to do?
There's a major issue that we have talked about that's still subject of incredible debate, and that's the issue of, despite all the gains of technology with technology that are beneficial to us, there's a new trend over the last several years, interestingly, just as ISIS began to expand its use of social media, and that's the encryption debate.
If you look at the Garland, Texas attack, those individuals communicated with an individual working for ISIS in Syria over 100 times in the 24 hours before that attack. That same individual for ISIS in Syria was communicating with people in New York City over the same channel. So that's a tremendous challenge.
We went to Israel to find out how that country deals with the constant peril of terror that threatens its very existence. In Jerusalem, we caught up with U.S. law enforcement leaders on a fact-finding mission. We asked Orlando's police chief, John Mina, his thoughts about Israel's approach to terrorism.
One of the things I learned over here that not only the police, but civilian security, and then also the general public just has a sense of awareness, probably more so than in the United States. And I think that's probably where we need to start heading.
And we spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a former Israeli elite forces commando, about combating terrorism.
The way you fight terrorism is you fight the terrorists. You don't say, I can't do anything because I have to defeat their ideas. Yeah, you will defeat their ideas, but first defeat them. You know, you didn't say, I'll fight the Nazis by first defeating their ideas. First you defeated them. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have these forces of radicalism reappearing in Europe or anywhere else. Of course you can. But you have to keep weeding out these weeds. If you don't weed them out, they'll overtake your garden.
Israel's critics accuse the nation of abusive tactics, but most Israelis say they recognize you have to strike a balance between security and civil liberties, and oftentimes security wins out. Some believe the next president may want to heed Netanyahu's advice. Rick Leventhal, Fox News.
When asked in our latest Fox News poll, Americans are split on whom they trust to do a better job on terrorism. Hillary Clinton has a 1-point advantage in this poll, but that is obviously within the margin of error. The clock is ticking as the bill that would allow the victims of 9/11 and their families, the families of the victims of 9/11, to sue the government of Saudi Arabia for possibly supporting terrorism is really gathering dust.
Automatically becomes law. If he does send it back, Congress doesn't have a clock during the time that they can try to override it. It takes a 2/3 vote to try to override a veto in both bodies of Congress. What President Obama is really trying to do here is maximize the time. Congress is trying to finish this interim spending bill, maybe include some Zika funding, and maybe get out sometime in the next week or so. So Thursday the 22nd is the key. That's what we're watching here in terms of the timeline.
Yeah, Chad, do they have the votes for an override? It seems like both houses, or the House and the Senate, passed with overwhelming numbers.
Yeah, those were overwhelming numbers because there was no recorded tally. In other words, there was no opposition. I want to put a fine point on this, though. In the Senate, it was done by unanimous consent, meaning nobody objected to them doing this. In the Senate, it was a voice vote, so there was no recorded tally. Per the Constitution, you have to have a recorded tally to try to do a veto override here. And that's going to be a big challenge because there are a lot of members of Congress who are for this bill, but there are some who don't want to be on the record against this. And what President Obama might do is try to postpone that veto override when there is a recorded vote on that until after the election.
And you can tell we're 51 days away from that election. Chad Pergram up on Capitol Hill. Chad, as always, thank you.
My pleasure.
Hacking has been a significant part of this presidential election, with emails from former Secretary of State Colin Powell and the Democratic National Committee being released and talked about. But could a hacker actually change your vote? Federal officials are adamant that that would be nearly impossible. But is that correct? Senior correspondent Eric Shawn investigates.
Can a machine be hacked?
I have demonstrated how to hack the ABC Advantage voting machines that we use in New Jersey.
He is the bane of election officials because Princeton University professor Andrew Appel says a touchscreen voting machine, the type used in about 10 states, can be tampered with.
I unlock the back door.
In 2008, he demonstrated how as part of an election lawsuit against New Jersey officials. Well, he notes there has been no documented case of a machine actually being hacked this way in a U.S. election. He says it could happen by simply swapping the machine's computer chip for his own.
And I'll just have to replace this one ROM chip with a fraudulent computer program.
He was able to change the votes the machine counted.
I figured out how to make a slightly different computer program that just before the close of the polls, it shifts some votes around from one candidate to another. And I wrote that computer program onto a memory chip like this. And now to hack a voting machine, you have to get 7 minutes alone with it with a screwdriver.
Our experience here in this office, we all concur that we have not seen one documented case in machine being compromised.
John Brzezowski, the Deputy Superintendent of Elections in Hudson County, New Jersey, insists in real life it cannot be done. He points to multiple redundant safeguards that protect machines. They are locked in secure areas under camera surveillance, and broken security tape on vital parts would show any violation.
I don't know how you could possibly do that to 500 machines and get the secrecy and the time to do so. I don't believe that's possible.
But the professor insists it is.
The good news is it's not something you can easily do from Russia.
But the bad news?
But the bad news is that it really is possible to do locally.
Well, the voting machine company Dominion told us the demonstration is not a realistic assessment, not a credible test, they say, because it was not an actual election. But Professor Appel says he's exposed a weakness, and it shows we should vote on machines with paper ballots for proof. By the way, here's the chip. It costs $4. Brett?
Amazing. Eric, thanks. We'll continue your reports next week. Next up, an expanded all-star panel joins me to talk about Homeland Security and the latest from the campaign trail.
I've been briefed about the bombings in New York and New Jersey and the attack in Minnesota. Obviously, we need to do everything we can to support our first responders.
Just before I got off the plane, a bomb went off in New York, and nobody knows exactly what's going on. But boy, we are living in a time. We better get very tough, folks. We better get very, very tough.
Investigations continue into the bombings in New York and New Jersey, the stabbing in Minnesota as this night continues. But as you see, the two candidates weighing in on both major parties. And the latest Fox News poll on the issues, as you see them laid out here, economy, government corruption, terrorism, the third one down there, Clinton holds a 1-point lead in the latest Fox News poll that is within the margin of error. And you see the rest of the issues there. This issue obviously will take a heavy prominence in not only the debate coming up, but in the election in 51 days. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Zeke Miller, political reporter for Time. Jillian Turner, former National Security Council staffer under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. And Tucker Carlson, host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Okay, Jillian, the attacks here obviously raise the prospect and the specter that we're going to be dealing with this all the way really from now on of these homegrown ISIS-inspired, and that's what they're leaning towards, at least in Minnesota.
Absolutely. So they've eliminated, law enforcement has eliminated the possibility in New York of this being connected to an international terrorist organization at this time. But that doesn't mean that in the case of New York, this is not a terrorist attack either, right? We've still got the very real possibility of domestic terror as well as what I think is even likelier, lone wolf terrorism, by which I mean an operative who's not officially affiliated with an international organization like ISIS, but is really in tune with their radical ideology. This is the kind of terrorism that people are talking about now when they talk about the third wave. This is really